There has been ongoing concern when it comes to Apple and China. Is that the key takeaway for you?
Well, the key takeaway for me is someone who's optimistic that these Apple Intelligence features are going to accelerate revenue growth. And I have much more ambitious expectations for the next year and 2 years. One of the big takeaways for me is the guidance kind of through cold water on this 20% kind of outside hope that we'd start to see some better acceleration in the December quarter. As you mentioned, the low single-digit guide. The street was at 7%, so probably analysts are going to shake out somewhere between 5 to 6%, similar growth rates we just saw in the September quarter. And so from my perspective, the big takeaway here is that the street was right, that this is going to take some time, a few quarters, before we start to see this acceleration in growth. And I think the guidance just confirmed that. And then just to dive into the China question, I previewed this and said they have to have China growth in the quarter. I think it was actually up 0.5%. I mean, it was fractional. Comps were really easy. They should have been up 5-6% where the street was at. So I think there's something else going on in China.
Gene, it's a fair question of where that future growth will come from, right? And that's great because we can talk about technology. You've been using Apple Intelligence in its early form. And when you think about China, there was some evidence, albeit third-party data evidence, that the consumer in China might be buying iPhone 16 in the hope that in the future, the platform would be available there because, of course, it's not now. The regulator won't allow it. How are you kind of modeling that?
Well, the timing of when so first I've been using the features, and I would describe the features as nice to have, but not need to have yet. I mean, they do a great job of consolidating my messages and notifications. I think that as far as kind of how this plays out is the geographic piece is really important. It's just going to be additional English countries for the rest of this year. And so that's going to be like UK, Canada, Australia. But then we still have this unanswered question about when does Europe start going? And then China, of course, they're going to have to do some sort of partnership with Baidu to get there. And so for this cycle to really be a super cycle, there's almost like these geopolitical things that need to fall into place. And ultimately, I believe that they will fall into place. I think Apple's got clout to make those things happen. And then additionally, even though I described the features as nice to have, not need to have, I just want to quickly frame in why I believe these will be need to have is that starting kind of first quarter of next year, once they start integrating more of the GPT functionality, but also open up more of this with developers, we get agentic AI.
There is optimism there, therefore, eventually, that Apple Intelligence will bear fruit. What is bearing fruits right here, right now, is the services side. But that's under duress from a regulatory perspective, if we're thinking about the App Store, for example. How do you think about regulation, Gene?
It's the black swan potential negative event here, is that services growth at 12%. The street was at 13, call it a wash. But I think that this came up on the Apple call last night. It came up on the Google call 2 nights ago. I think services continues to do well because their base keeps growing, hitting record highs. But I think that there's still this piece out there, and I would put a low probability, 10, 15%, that something happens between the relationship between Google and Apple on the search placement deal with Safari. And that's probably 10 to 15% of their income. So I think that that's something else I'm focused on.